Okay.
Yes, Chairman.
Yep. Lovely. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Rochford Council's Remote Review Committee meeting, and welcome to anybody watching this via live stream. We'll start by agenda item number 1, which is apologies for absence. We do have apologies, very late apologies, unfortunately, from councillors Mr. and Mrs. Shaw. That is a last-minute apologies for absence due to a family emergency. Agenda item number 2, substitute members. We welcome Councillor Wilson for the Green Group and Councillor Merrick for Mrs. Shaw.
Chairman, Councillor Mrs. Mason.
Councillor Mrs. Mason, yes, you raised your hand.
Yes, under apologies for absence, obviously not seen in time, but never mind. Councillor Eves, unfortunately, has got delayed in South London and is unlikely to be able to make it to the meeting in time. And you also have should have apologies from Councillor Hookway, who sent them in. Councillor Eves was substituting for him.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mrs. Mason.
Yeah,
Sonia?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chairman, may I also say that there's been an issue with providing me with documentation. Unfortunately, the council sent it to me and it's locked up my computer. We've only managed to get my computer back at 7:10. I haven't managed to read all the reports. So I will give my apologies for after item 6. And I would like it noted that I haven't had access to the exempt report, so I wouldn't be able to stay for that anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for letting us know, Councillor Mrs. Mason. Sorry, just going back to agenda item number 2, members, substitute members. Just to reiterate, we've got Councillor Wilson for the Green Group and Councillor Merrick for Councillor Mrs. Shaw. Moving on to agenda item number 3, non-members attending. Councillor Williams, Councillor Efty and Councillor Steptoe, and I also believe Councillor Wootton as well. Welcome all. Moving on to agenda item number 4, which are minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of September 2020, which have been circulated to members. Are members happy for me to sign those when the opportunity arises?
Agree, Chairman.
Yes, Chairman.
Agree.
Councillor Mrs. Mason, I'm sorry, have you raised your hand? Or...
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have. I'm afraid I haven't got access to the minutes at the moment, but let me have a look. But there is a problem with the minutes. Firstly, the draft report was meant to be circulated to members for agreement. I note that came out today, and I wonder if there's a time frame for that to be actually responded to yourself, because I'd anticipated it before this meeting. Is there a time frame for that?
I will refer to Sonia. I think we agreed, Sonia, that it was by this Friday, wasn't it? Am I correct?
Chairman, it is this Friday in order to give adequate time to feed into publication of the agenda for council on Monday.
Thank you. And I would put it on record, members. Unfortunately, the delay in that was actually my fault, and I have to accept responsibility for that. So apologies for the lateness.
No, that's quite all right, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure we're all very busy at the moment. The other difficulty I have with the minutes is under the work plan. That is an inaccurate minute as it stands. I'm just trying to see if I can get hold of it too. The work plan, if you remember, was missed off the agenda. So therefore we could not, and you allowed it to be added on because of the error, which that should be noted in the minutes. It shouldn't be actually ignored. But the other issue with that, if you bear with me, yes, it says here, in response to a member question relating to the progress of the management companies, I actually brought that up and asked you to put, if we could discuss that, which you agreed to, and noted that we hadn't had any resources. You had asked the officers to provide you with resources because we hadn't got the resource. Since that meeting, I have emailed the officer and not had a response. So at the moment, I am the chairman of the working group, so the minute is totally wrong. We are unable to make another meeting because either the officers not provided the documentation, and if you recall, you asked if the council had adequate resources, and that was going to be checked out. So I can only assume the council hasn't got adequate resources, or if it has, it's not providing them. I mean, this is now 9 months, 10 months since the last meeting. But the question here is the minute. The minute is actually wrong.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mrs Mason. I don't think any members would have an objection to it being noted in the minutes that the work plan wasn't initially included, but was later added. I don't think any members would have an issue with that, because I think you're quite right, Mrs Mason. That was a more accurate description of what took place on the evening. If any members do have an issue with that, would you use the raise hand icon now? And if nobody raises their hand, then I suggest that we do include that in the minutes, the revised minutes. There doesn't appear to be any objection. So Sonia, could we arrange for that to be done?
And the other item, Madam, Mr Chairman, sorry, is the fact about resources. You were going to discuss that and with the officers, and as I say, I also emailed the officers concerned. No response. So
I did, yeah. Just to confirm, I did.
When I read this minute, I was quite astounded. I actually had to go back to the audio recording to check that my recollection was accurate. So I have checked it.
Okay, thank you, Mrs Mason. I think we can note that in the minutes, and it's something I will have to follow up. I did follow up with the officers as well. There is no simple solution. Unfortunately, I do believe that there are resource issues, and that's all I can say at the moment. Sorry, Marcus Houghton, I can see you've raised your hand.
If there are resource issues, Mr Chairman, perhaps you could let us know, and we can take that up at the group leaders meeting, because it's not good enough that an important working group can't have the resources to meet. Thank you. Okay,
at the moment I haven't had that confirmed, but I'll ask for confirmation if that is the case, and if it is certainly the case, we'll circulate that to members. Marcus, did you want to speak?
Yeah, sorry if I may interject on this. I mean, we've had a brief discussion around this today. I think there's been a bit of a vacuum in terms of who takes this forward. But I said I'm quite happy to take this back up, and I'll be contacting the working group shortly, so in the next couple of days, to arrange a meeting soon. Most of the points I think they raised in the questions from the last working group we've now collected the information together. So I'm happy to take that forward again. Thank you.
I think the problem there comes is it was legal opinion we were seeking, and if you're happy to provide that, then that's fine.
Sorry, yes, we do have that, but I think it's just fallen between the cracks a little in terms of there wasn't an officer to actually coordinate the responses. So most of the responses actually come back in. So we do have a legal response. And I said, look, it's just a question of tidying up the loose ends, and then I'm more than happy to have that meeting.
Well, thank you, Marcus. Perhaps you could contact me and we can sort that out.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Councillor and Mrs. Mason. So
Yes.
Sonia, if we can just amend those, minutes, and then if with those amendments, are members happy for me to sign the minutes with the amendments that we've just discussed? I'm assuming that as nobody has raised a hand, no one has an objection. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 5, which is to receive declarations of interest, including any whipping declarations. Please raise your hand if you do need to declare an interest. There are no hands raised. Thank you, members. So moving on to item number 6, which is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, otherwise known as RIPA. Members would have had a report circulated to them. This is an annual report that comes before the committee. I'm going to pass over to Louisa Moss, who attends the meeting for this agenda item. Louisa, the Assistant Director for People and Communities. And can I ask Louisa, in the usual way we do, if you could just give members a brief summary of the contents of the report and then answer any questions that they may have at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate that this is an annual update on the Council's covert surveillance activity, otherwise known as RIPA activity. And also it asks for note that there's been some changes to the RIPA policy, specifically around staffing changes and changes to the name of authorising applicants and officers. So, as I say, as detailed in the report, it details for a further ongoing year that there's been no RIPA activity, which is probably not so surprising, bearing in mind, obviously, the seriousness threshold as detailed in our RIPA policy and in RIPA itself. We don't carry out any fraud activity now, investigations at the council, and haven't done for some while now. That's with DWP. And of course, all the responsible officers around investigations generally have their own processes around RIPA authorisation, especially trading standards and the police. So I just want to draw your attention to paragraph 4.3, 4.4. That refers explicitly to some overt surveillance activity around cameras, because we've had some notifications and letters from the Camera Surveillance Commissioner quite recently, and as a result of a survey that he carried out to all local authorities across the country, he's produced a report with a number of findings, and that report unfortunately came just at the time of publication of this report. So I've committed to come back to review with some details around how we propose to strengthen our corporate approach and policy around overt surveillance with particular reference to cameras. So that's all I need to report and summarise. Any questions?
Thank you, Louisa. Councillor Wilkinson. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. Louisa, just a very quick question. I think you actually, in fairness, you've partially answered this, so perhaps I should have waited for you to finish, so I do apologise. RIPA is something I was heavily involved in my previous life. We used to have authorities of all sorts. Is this usual for the council, and forgive me because I've only been on the council for a year and a half, is this usual for us to have no authorities whatsoever in the 12-month period? And is that because we genuinely don't need to, or is it because you've, have you had applications that have been turned down, etc.? Because when I know, working with colleagues of yours from the Environment and Health, for example, that they have processes in place they have to do to get around the RIPA issues. And I just wonder if there are circumstances, or have been circumstances, where you've been approached, or whoever the authority is, the officer has been approached for an authority, but it's been turned down.
Just to answer that, it's very normal for us to not have any covert authorisations, in part because of the the actual sort of seriousness threshold we don't meet. We used to have them back in 2011, 2009, and having looked at them only recently, I note that they were exclusively all around benefit fraud, and where we had to do some quite directed covert authorisations, but it's very common for us to have no activity under RIPA. Obviously, overt surveillance, as you know, there's two distinct strands, is a very different type of surveillance, but RIPA, it's quite normal.
It doesn't come under RIPA, does it? Yeah.
No, that's right.
Ah, okay. Okay, lovely. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Louisa, just referring back to 4.4 on page 6.2, it says there obviously the Commissioner's report and recommendations were received 15 September and now being considered by all local authorities. Having only just received the report, any changes needed to the Council's policy will be replaced, and you've gone on to describe that. Can you just tell me, when considering whether or not these recommendations, I'm assuming this is what would happen, you will begin giving consideration to these recommendations being included in our policy. Is that something we do just on our own as a local authority, or is this something that Rochford will be reviewing in association with other authorities?
No, every local authority chair will be looking at their own compliance against the camera surveillance assessment codes. So we just need to look more closely at our approaches. And probably at this stage, I'm considering adopting a separate corporate policy just to align all our approaches so they all sort of line up. So we'll be looking at it as a local authority in our own right. Every other local authority, depending on how much overt surveillance they have in place, will sometimes already have policies. So the survey was carried out across the piece, but we will be looking at it individually.
And just one last question from myself, Louisa. 2.3, which obviously refers to RIPA training, was undertaken in 2018 with refresher training scheduled for this year. Is there any update with regards to the training that's proposed? And I suppose I do appreciate the importance of training, but on this issue with RIPA, bearing in mind how seldom it's used and has been for the amount of years, is there a big cost involved in training, or?
Online training has been provisionally booked for the beginning of January, and it's for all authorised officers and obviously relevant portfolio holder and members of this review committee that are interested. To tell you the truth, the Commissioner would expect us to have refresher training around RIPA and just online investigations generally. And the cost for up to 20 attendees is approximately £2,000.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I'm just looking, it doesn't appear that any other councillors have any questions on RIPA. I will be honest, I'm not completely surprised. This is an annual one, and for members that have sat on the review committee for a number of years, they're very familiar with this topic. In that case, members, we will need to, there is obviously a recommendation, and that recommendation is to note the amendments to the Council's RIPA policy set out in section 4 to the report. So I'm going to move that motion, but I need to ask for a second.
Second that.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson or Wilkinson. Thank you both for putting that forward. We need to take a vote. Voting will be done by a roll call of names, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. When Sonia calls out your name, please indicate if you wish to have a recorded vote, and then whether you are voting for or against the recommendation, or if you wish to abstain. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Barton.
No recorded vote for the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Burton.
No recorded vote for the recommendation.
Councillor Mrs. Gooding.
No recorded vote for the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. McPherson.
No recorded vote and for the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Mason.
No recorded vote and for the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Merrick.
No recorded vote and for the recommendation.
Councillor Milne.
No recorded vote and for the recommendation.
Councillor Mrs Pavlin.
No recorded vote and for the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Sperring.
No and for.
Councillor Wilkinson.
No and for, sorry.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilson.
No and for.
That's unanimous,
Okay.
Chairman.
Chair,
Lovely.
and Sonia,
Thank you very
Councillor
much.
Cannell here.
Oh, hello. Good evening, Councillor Cannell.
Also no and for, although missed off the order.
Sorry, I didn't
Thank
see
you.
you there. Sorry, Chairman.
That's all right, Sonia, no worries.
Just at this moment of the meeting, if I can I just ask before you leave, are you still there, Councillor Mrs Mason?
Yes, I am, yes.
Councillor Mrs Mason, I do appreciate you did need to leave the meeting after this. I just wondered whether or not, because obviously on the agenda for this evening's meeting, we do have an item that was called in by yourself and two other members who unfortunately aren't able to make the meeting this evening. Did you want to go ahead with that this evening, in which case we might just need a bit of detail on that before you go, or would you like to postpone that?
That's it, Mr Chairman, is that in trying to, the council sent it to me and trying to, when I unlocked it using the password they provided, it actually corrupted my computer and locked up my computer. I haven't been able to read the report or the exempt report. It took considerable time. It wasn't until 7:10 that I couldn't even switching my computer off. It wouldn't release it. My husband had to spend considerable time sorting it out, what had happened. I believe it's something to do with catches, and I don't know, I'm not technical. But unfortunately, I can't comment because I've got no access to any documentation.
Okay, so I think it would, as the three members that called it in won't be able to really discuss it, or won't be in a position to discuss it this evening, would you like to?
I don't see any reason, Mr. I don't. You can carry it forward if you wish, if the timing allows. Otherwise,
Yes,
there's no
there might
reason why other members could not make a decision.
Okay, was there any specific point that you would like to, that you called
Not
it in?
at this
Or?
point in time, because I've got no access to any of my documentation. You'll appreciate I've had 15 minutes to prepare for this meeting because of the
Okay,
technical problems that have been created.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mrs Mason. I can see that Marcus Houghton has indicated to speak on this, so I don't know if you would just want to listen before you maybe leave for this evening.
No,
Marcus, sorry?
I've got no access to information, so it would be wrong of me to comment on something when I haven't been able to see the documentation, that it's not been provided to me. So it's wrong.
Okay.
It would be wrong of me to comment in that situation. I mean, we gave the reasons for calling in, so that it should be quite clear, and I'm sure members are capable of making a decision. Thank you.
Yep, that's understood, and thank you for that. Marcus, do you still want to speak, or would you want to? I think if that's the case, members still discuss that item this evening as planned.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Mrs Mason. Okay, members, moving on to agenda item number 7, which is the waste and recycling collection policy. And for this item this evening, we welcome Marcus Houghton, the Assistant Director of Place and Environment, and Councillor Williams, the portfolio holder for Environment. Once again, members, you would have had the report circulated to you. Marcus, do you want to run through this with members? Just highlight any points that you think need to be highlighted and then answer any questions. And again, Councillor Williams, if any questions are directed to you, if you could answer those as best you can.
Yeah, thank you and good evening. It's a relatively short and straightforward report. In essence, it sort of captures what is the existing waste collection policy for this council into a formal document. Up till now, we've not had any real public document as such. It's been very much that we refer back to the current contract, but it's not something that's available to the public. And so it's felt that with the member working group, it'd be useful to have something that's actually served as a baseline from which we say this is our current policy and practices, and therefore when we change, or if you do make any changes whatsoever for the new contract, we can actually have something to refer back to. And I felt that up till this time we didn't have anything of that sort. So it's really just to formalise our existing policy. And in many ways, the report just brings to your attention the document that's attached to there, which is the proposed draft waste collection policy, with key aspects such as bin provision, contamination, missed bins, etc. I just want to be quite clear to members that I've only asked them to note the aspect of this because it's what we already do. It's just trying to formalise this so it's useful for the member working group going forward, that if we do make any changes to the future contract in 2 years' time, that we have this as a reference point to say, well, this is what we already do. And if we make a change, we are comparing against that. And I thought it was useful for the public to have something to refer to as well, hence the document that's being produced. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. No one's indicated to ask any questions at the minute, but I'm going to be honest and say I've got a few. Firstly, whenever a working group undertakes a project like this, you know, my thanks go to all those members that have helped do that. It's a very thorough job. You can see that just from reading the report and also looking at the policy. The questions I have really are, although I've got a few, they are fairly minor, and I do think it's important to bear your comments in mind that this is actually something you're asking us to note because we already do it, and I think that's quite important to bear in mind. I think the first thing that struck me about the report, it is very concise, and I don't expect it to be changed much. There are quite a few references to charges being made for various different aspects in this policy. Yet the charges seem, if you were to read this policy, to be completely at the discretion of the council. And I do worry, that does concern me slightly, that if this was as a guide for members of the public, how that would be interpreted, it could possibly, I believe, open the council up to maybe some criticism of unfairly charging certain residents more than others. I noticed there was a comment, for example, about charging schools at your discretion, but that doesn't stop you charging one school and not charging the other. And I just wondered whether or not there's certain things for charges for the provision of bins, charges for fines. Is there any way that some of those charges could be put into the report? I mean, if we do make charges already, and if we do fine, would that not be worth putting into the report just to make it very clear?
I guess, yes. I mean, obviously some of it's already been covered, such as the bin collection policy is something that I think has gone through full council a couple of years ago. And so it's also in the fees and charges, so that there's some, I mean, I think the wording around the charging for bins is fairly concise. I think you're probably referring to, like I said, more about the schools and medical waste is probably the two areas that spring to mind. I mean, it's something we can say, look at within the document, providing a bit more concise wording around.
Well, I mean, in addition to my comments, for example, 2.14, the district council will replace free of charge any bins damaged whilst carrying out collection operations, excluding any damage because of prohibited waste being placed in the bin, in which case a charge will be made. Well, how much will that charge be and who decides it?
Yes, I'll take the point. We can make that clear, yeah. I mean, that's within the contract.
Yeah, there are a few comments like that through the policy, and I quite agree with them, and I can see why they're there. But I think more so, A, for clarity for members of the public, and B, to protect the council's position, it might be an idea to have those set out and made clear so that there can be no ambiguity over what those charges are and who's deciding them.
Yes, so that probably could be something set out within the fees and charges, for example.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Councillor Sperring, I can see you've indicated to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Having been on that working committee, I think the point we were trying to make is that if you put everything down so rigidly, you have no flexibility if a certain situation is a slight variation of something else. You are committed to make that charge, and you reduce any opportunity that you have to use common sense. You are obliged to follow the policy. If you don't follow the policy, then you go down the road you've just said, that you'd be accused of not applying the same rules. So we felt it was better to use, say, a little bit of flexibility and allow common sense to prevail. I think that was more the argument, rather than being so dictatorial.
Yeah, and I think I can understand that, and I can understand why the working group would come up with that conclusion. But I don't know. I think there maybe has to be a balance. I mean, again, for example, a collection and disposal charge is made for the service of removing special and bulky collections. You know, is our residents charged the same? Is it based on weight? Is it based on the vehicle?
So I think, sorry if I can interrupt. I think you want to say a fee within there because it's a policy that stretches over a few years. But if you refer to the fee, I said perhaps we should have referred to the fees and charges at some point in the document, because the fees and charges does set that price. So annual council each year, if you think of the fees and charges that come up for the with medium-term financial sort of strategy, they're agreed at that time. So if you look within there, you'll see bulky charges and various charges for bins within there. There may be a couple more that needs to be more explicit, but I think that's possibly all that needs to be done is to refer to the fees and charges a bit more explicitly.
Yeah, I agree. Even if and I think Councillor Sperry makes a very good point. Even if perhaps the charges are, if there's some sort of caveat included in the policy to say that those charges and fees may be subject to change depending on circumstances, but I think it would give members of the public a clearer guide of the fees and charges that they will expect to incur. My other comments, there's a couple that I think you've kind of covered. Generally, when you read this policy, and again, I don't disagree with it, the onus is very much on the householders to get it right. And if, for example, an unintentional breach of doing something wrong, which I think possibly we've all done at some point, totally unintentional, not realising, that can result in somebody's collection not being collected on the time and waiting another 2 weeks for it to be done. Do the council think that they are doing enough to inform residents of what their obligations are?
That's a good question. I mean, like you say, obviously the policy reflects the contractual situation that we're within. But I mean, that's something that the portfolio and I have discussed before about whether we educate enough, and that's something we're going to have to look at again, I think. So we certainly we do recognise that we need to do a better campaign, for example, around contamination and the like, and provide more information in terms of what they call bin hangers, as to why your bin hasn't been emptied, that sort of thing. And that is something that we're looking to put into sort of practice in the next sort of 2 or 3 months. So you're right to raise that it does seem slightly stacked against the residents at times. It's not intended that way, but that's if you like, the contractual obligation we're tied into as well at times. Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Sorry, Chair, I was actually working out how to put my hand down because Marcus has just answered my question. I was going to completely support what you said, actually, Chairman. Because I've had a couple of residents within the last couple of months who've contacted me, and actually, I think, I mean, Marcus may be able to confirm this. I think the issue is actually because it's more is it Suez, I think, who have got the contract for this, isn't it? Is it Suez who have the contract? And it was I had exactly this where a couple of residents didn't have their bins collected for whatever reason. They didn't understand why. There was no note on there at all. And it took me the best part of a week to find somebody at Suez that would take the issue on and work. And they still had to wait 2 weeks. So if for what it's worth, I would completely support your last comments, Chairman. That I do think that, whilst I do accept what Marcus is saying, the onus does need to be on the householders because we can't be responsible for everybody. But I do think that we could advise a bit better, and that's I'll take no further than that.
Right. So if I may, I'd say that the existing contract has that onus. It's something we may well review. So
apologies. Somebody needs to advise the householders a bit better. That's whichever
course,
way,
yes.
whether it's us or the contractors. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. One other quick question, Marcus, on 2.8. It states where the council undertakes collections by passing over a private road or drive, the property owner will be required to indemnify the council from any liability for damage to the road. Can I just ask, how is that managed at the moment?
I mean, it is and I think if you read through some of the other parts of the document, you'll see that it's actually quite a tricky thing to do. You know, so the emphasis normally is that we would do so if asked to collect over a private road, but we'll make it quite clear that we take no responsibility for the damage to that road surface. You know, so it's normally we don't have any issues, but where we occasionally will get to a situation where we will require a letter to say that they are happy for us to enter across what is essentially their private land. Otherwise, what we do is we tend to say that we will only collect bins from the public highway, which is the legal duty. And so there's some room for negotiation there. It's not straightforward. I mean, it's almost a case by case situation with private roads.
I think just the reason I raised that, obviously, my personal background is in insurance, and in particular, commercial liability insurance. And I know it would be very, very difficult for the council to waive their liability if they did, even if you had a letter from a resident agreeing to that. The end result would, it would be very hard for the council to waive their liability.
Sorry, it's not such perhaps again that's could be where some clarity. So it's not such indemnify against let's say general public liability. It's more literally the surface. So if they're saying we would like you to drive a 26-ton lorry across this driveway, and we say we're not going to because for the reasons we don't think it's going to hold up for that, then we would want some letter of comfort to say yes, that's fine. We're happy that it would do so. And that's the level you're looking for.
Okay. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to thank AD Marcus Houghton and working group members. It's been the most excellent report. Thank you all. Councillor Wilkinson, if you have any issues with failed collections, please let me know. I can always take this matter up for you, and I'm sure we can resolve it more quickly than that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And my very last minor comment would be that at the moment, and to be honest, generally with waste collection, certainly from my experience from residents, I don't really get too many complaints or comments. Probably the one I get or I hear the most is how bins are replaced by staff once they've actually been emptied. And again, I don't think that would have hurt to have been put into the policy that we've got.
As in the contract.
That the staff will do their best endeavours to replace it away from the pavement. There's lots in there about what will happen to residents if they leave their bins on the pavement. But very often, and I've been in this situation before, when your bins are collected early in the morning and you don't come home till the evening, and your bins are scattered across the pavement, that can be a real issue. And I just wondered whether or not maybe there could have been a comment in there about that, or just highlighting the fact that we appreciate that they have a very difficult job to do, and it's not always going to be perfect. I think everyone accepts that, but I do wonder whether or not it could just be there that they would endeavour to do that, or something along that lines.
I can certainly give it some thought. I mean, it's like you say, it is quite inflammatory at times. It's probably what we call the replacement of bins is certainly the key complaint that I deal with at times as well. But it's a tricky one because sometimes what can seem like a reasonable replacement to one person can seem unreasonable to the next. And I've had that situation to deal with many times now, where even I will look and think, well, that seems okay, but the resident is still adamant that it must be within almost a sort of an imaginary square on the ground that they understand is dedicated to their bin. So it's a hard one to word, but I do take your point.
Okay, Thank you. No other members have indicated any questions or asked to speak. So on that basis, there is a recommendation to note for this agenda item. And that recommendation is that the council resolves to note the contents of the report and attach policy. And I think, as Marcus has already pointed out, this is because this policy refers to what we currently already do. If our members have it, or do I need to take a vote for that? I think I do, don't I? Or can I? No, I can just note that.
Yeah, don't need to vote, Chairman.
Okay, if members are happy to note, then that's great. If you're not happy to note, can you please raise your hand? There are none raised, so I am assuming that the whole committee accepts that that's a note. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 8, which is the key decisions document, which hopefully everybody has received a copy of. There are 2 items on the key decision document. The first, I'll refer to the code that's on the left-hand side, 7/20, and that's the disposal of former redundant Crown Hill public conveniences subject to marketing and granted permission for a future leasehold agreement. That's going, I think, November 2020. Hopefully all members have seen that. I have a feeling we might be seeing that again. Any questions on that, members? Or no? Okay. Moving on to the second item on the key decision document, which is 8/20, and the subject is the leisure contract beyond the 2020-21 financial year. The decision is being by the executive, and the date when or period within which decision is to be made is December 2020. And there's obviously some details below of why that is. Have any members got any questions on that key decision item?
Sorry, Chair, I'm trying to raise my hand.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Councillor Wilkinson.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to ask, Chairman, if I may, on that. Press that back. Sorry, if I may, on that subject.
On the
I know that Matt's not with us actually, but does anybody know? Are we going to wait until? Because we're sort of in a bit of a limbo period, really, aren't we, with this current situation? Because I mean, I've spoken to Matt a couple of times in the last few weeks about it. And particularly to do with Clements Hall and how they're performing. And I think they're still very, very much under review. So at what point are we going to make a decision about reviewing this contract and looking beyond March 21? Does anybody know that? Because I don't think we're really in a position to do that at the moment.
I don't know for sure. I briefly spoke to Matt again a while ago, several weeks ago now. But my understanding is it probably would be a bit too early to visit that at the moment. And I think, although it says about the decision being made in December 2020, I think it is more likely to be around that time. Councillor Sperrin, I can see you raised your hand. Did you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not a member of the executive, but I think it's fair to say the whole situation regarding any arrangements with leisure facilities are under constant review. A substantial amount of money has been invested for the benefit of both residents, and also the fact that it has secured somewhere in the region of 150 jobs for residents of this district. However, as I say, the situation is under review, and I would suggest between now and Christmas time, a further decision will have to be made, because there is no doubt that further requests, is my guess, will be asked of the district council for investment to maintain the leisure services. And again, that will be, I say, nearer the time. Has the present system worked? Are we getting good support, and all the rest of the things that go with it? So, I say, as far as I'm aware, and I believe Councillor Williams may come in with some comments as well, the whole situation is under constant review, and no firm commitments as to future commitments or where we go have yet been made.
Thank you, Councillor Sperrin. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I can confirm that Dave has said. The situation is very fluid at the moment. I think we're expecting the first reports to come in mid to late October. So hopefully in the very near future, we should know how it's going. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I think that's slightly earlier than I was led to believe a few weeks ago. So that's a good thing. That's a positive thing. So hopefully, Councillor Wilkinson, has that answered your question on that item?
Well, yes, so far as you can, Chairman. Yeah, I have great concern. I beg your pardon, sorry?
I said it is a difficult one to answer.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
The reason I wanted to speak on it is because, and the reason I've had to speak to Matt a couple of times is because both times the company that runs the leisure contract has been referred to me, or residents are referred to me, it's because of loss of jobs. Because they're making an awful lot of people redundant at the moment. And it's caused me some concern that as an authority, we have invested a lot of money, which I respect that was a decision taken by the executive. And yet we're still seeing jobs going. So I think I spoke to Councillor Wootton about this as well, but I think I was starting some assurance really that, that they are being monitored and, that we are getting value for money out of it. So that's really why I wanted to mention it. But I accept what Councillor Williams has said. Obviously, it's a fluid issue and something which is ongoing so far as review is concerned. So thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 9, which is the work plan. And hopefully all members have got a copy of that in front of them. You can see there that has changed. It has been amended and updated since the last meeting. There are just a couple of things to note. For instance, the review of the Constitution and also the review of the Council's overview and scrutiny function. They are both penciled in for November. At the moment, they will remain there. However, due to, there's possibly going to be some developments on that, and it may be a bit premature to be bringing that before review in November for it to be effective on either of those. So if anything does change, members will be notified as soon as possible. And we will really have to take a pragmatic approach with regards to these two items as to if we call them in too early, it might not be an effective move. There might not be an awful lot to review. So we do need to keep our eye on those. But at the moment, they are staying in the November work plan, but they may be subject to change. But if they are, we will let you know as soon as possible. With regards to the January item, which is one that we are asking members of the public to nominate any topics or issues. Actually, Sonia, I haven't got my notes on that. Can you just brief members very quickly on what the plan is for that?
Yes, basically what I'm hoping to do is to finalise a sort of a survey form that we will put up on the council website and advertise on our social media channels, so that we're encouraging residents to come forward with any ideas for the committee to review, with a view to looking at that in January.
Thank you, Sonia. So obviously, if any members want to mention that to any of their residents, if any of their residents have come forward to them and asked them, which residents do, can you look in this? Can you have a look at this? It may be worthwhile going back to those residents and asking them to nominate those subjects and hopefully get it before review. We did it a couple of years ago and it was successful, so hopefully we can repeat that this year. Have any members got any questions regarding the work plan? No? Okay. Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 10, exclusion of the press and public. So I will now move a recommendation under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972. The public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Councillor,
Yeah, that's
Councillor
fine.
Milne. Oh, lovely, thank you. And moving on then to agenda item number 11. This is the review of grounds maintenance and street cleansing contract. Sorry, Sonia. Am I able to move on to agenda item number 11?
Just one moment, Chairman.
Thank you.